Hi, welcome to our news flash segment where we grab news flashes from around the world that grab our attention and hopefully yours too. We think it will grab your attention. Yeah, what do you got?
You're not going to like my first one.
Oh.
It's about a tiger with coronavirus.
Oh, I like monkeys, but tigers are nice.
Okay. Well, there's a video going around that a tiger in the Bronx Zoo got the coronavirus.
Bronx Zoo, is that New York?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, I did a little bit of research on this. Animals, it's saying virtually every animal species in the world can get the coronavirus, can get a version of the coronavirus. That's where it originated from, that's where it started. So yes, the tiger has a coronavirus, but it's not the same coronavirus that everybody has right now in this pandemic. It's not the same strain of coronavirus. This is an animal strain. Now, coronaviruses did come from an animal, but it takes years and years for the coronavirus to mutate, and it came from bats. I got a second opinion doing some more research by Mercury News, and they state the same thing, that humans share similar cell receptors with bats. That's why it's easier for humans to get the coronavirus, because we have the same cell receptors as bats, or similar.
All right, so animals have their own version of coronavirus and humans have their version of coronavirus. And so why is that important?
Well, people are wondering if this can get into their dog or cat, that their domestic house pet.
Well, I imagine that animals are always getting something or other because they're just animals and they behave differently, hopefully, than...
Yeah, they behave a lot differently than humans.
Humans, which some people refer to as animals, but that's not completely correct.
News went on to say that we do have the similar cell receptors as bats. That's why the coronavirus, after many years, mutated and we got it. But it's not going to jump over into your dog and cat, your coronavirus. Your dog and cat is not going to get, your house pet will not get
from humans. It's not going to get it from humans.
Right.
If it's going to get it, it's going to get it from your neighbor's dog. It's not going to get
bat poop or something. Who knows?
Well,
I'm just saying.
Okay.
That's where they originated.
Behavior and stuff. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
All right. Well, I'd like to talk about Corona beer. They were getting a lot of making fun of the name Corona beer. And so they've had to, over this, halt brewing over coronavirus. Since the start of the crisis, Mexican brewery that produces Corona beer has been the punchline of jokes and memes, so that they've had to stop brewing. So suspending production because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So they're in the process of lowering production at our plants to the bare minimum, the company said in a statement. Just thought it was interesting. In case you were wondering, because when the word coronavirus first came out, I think a lot of people thought, coronavirus, are you drinking that Corona beer? Because that gives you coronavirus. You know that, don't you? So anyway, that's why they changed it to COVID-19. No, it's not. All right, moving on.
All right, well, guess what? There are a couple of countries that aren't doing the full-blown lockdown.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. One of them is Sweden.
Okay, there were several that people mentioned, but Sweden was in the news.
They're not doing the full-blown lockdown. They are doing a little bit of the social distancing, but all business is as usual.
Okay.
And gatherings of 500 people they aren't doing, and they did shut down some colleges and high schools, but no grade schools.
Yeah, so they did a partial lockdown, but not a complete lockdown. Okay, so there are countries that aren't going along with the standard, with the MO here. So,
well, the health agency in Sweden is allowing the Swedes to take responsibility for their own health and to take responsibility for the health of others through social distancing, which they say isn't very hard for the Swedes since they were already very good at social distancing with each other.
It's interesting to me that there are some countries and even some states in the USA that are electing to allow people to take personal responsibility, of course, with proper guidance, i.e. education, what people should do, social distancing, covering themselves, and this kind of thing. So that's a really interesting subject to me, and it's a really important aspect of how people react and how governments react to situations that require really important decision making. Because if we allow emotions to rule, then things get emotional, and emotional just gets out of hand. So
the population in New York City is 9 million, and the population of the whole country of Sweden is 10.2 million. They have not had a lockdown. They're still going to work. Sweden has had confirmed, as of April 8th, 8,400 confirmed cases with 687 deaths. New York City, not the state of New York, I want to make that clear, has had confirmed cases 76,876 as of April 6th. But those, of course, they're doing a lot more testing there. And so that's probably why. There's probably more people in Sweden too. There's probably just as many, or maybe not, I don't know, because you don't know without testing. But the city of New York has 3 times the amount of deaths than the city of Sweden. And New York has a complete lockdown. New York City, I saw the webcam.
So the important, I think, points that stand out to me is that even though we're comparing similar populations, New York has 10 times as many cases. As you said, they may be because there's more testing going on, or any testing going on. We don't know. And
3 times as many deaths.
But regardless of the testing, there are 3 times as many deaths. So even without the testing, clearly there's 3 times as many deaths per the population comparison. So even though the one with the more deaths is the one with the lockdown, and the one without the lockdown has 1/3 the deaths, that's a really, really interesting number, to analyze.
I think it is very interesting. I'm not sure why. It could be that because there was a lot of travelers there at first in New York City, because that's a hub, international area, that just infected so many people.
Yeah.
Or something else.
So I just want to be clear that we're not trying to minimize anybody's loss. If you've had a loss, please understand that YouTubers such as us also have personal things going on in the background that we don't always talk about. My own mom barely made it out of the hospital with the flu. It wasn't corona, but
it was influenza A.
Influenza. She went on a bus and then she came down with it. So we are empathetic about the situation. So we're not making light of it. We're simply bringing forward news flashes that grab our attention for one reason or another, and discussing them. And another aspect of this big picture is this, that there's so much focus in the media about the deaths and this and that and these kind of numbers like that, subject of the COVID-19. But the other side of the story you don't see a whole lot of, and these are headlines that grabbed my attention, were 2 other aspects of the other side of this story, which is the lockdown. Because you have 2 sides to the story. You have the virus and the effects on people, and then you have the lockdown part of it, which is an attempt to stem this pandemic. So to keep a balanced view, the other side of the story, these other news flashes that grabbed my attention this week were the effects of the lockdown on the poor, and it's not just specifically in one particular country. It's countries all over the globe,
even first world,
how it's affecting the poor in those countries. And I'm just going to briefly mention some of the headlines. Like, amid lockdown, South Africa's waste pickers suffer the most. And the articles, you can look them up yourself if you want more detail. But and then you've got Brazil's homeless faced many risks before the coronavirus arrived, and it talks about Brazil's capital has 24,000 homeless people that face significant risks from lack of access. And a lot of these poor places and poor people have lack of access to proper hygiene. They have lack of access to, because of the lockdown, they're not earning enough money. They're on the verge of starvation, literal starvation, not just talking about starvation, actual starvation. For example, here's another headline: "Future is scary, quote unquote. The poor hit hardest by India coronavirus lockdown." So in that article goes into millions being jobless, hundreds of millions actually,
wow.
in the poor community, and fear going hungry as they desperately wait for government help amid world's largest lockdown. And in the article it goes into detail about how they're waiting and waiting on the government to help them, right? And the government never shows up. They say they're going to give them money and they're going to give them food, but they never get the money, they never get the food, and the people can't feed their children, and they just had a tortilla for dinner and that kind of thing. So very, very rough, the lockdown itself on the poor communities in many, many countries. Another one here: Navajo Nation fears of hunger as COVID-19 lockdown to intensify. So this is from the United States. So Navajo authorities set to beef up coronavirus restrictions as U.S. aid trickles into tribal lands facing food insecurity. So this is the other side of the story, is the lockdown, and the parts that people just a lot of times they just kind of mention it in passing, and there's not really enough time devoted to it. And a lot of times when people bring these things up, they are labeled as heartless, like you don't care about people, or they're just labeled, but because you aren't looking at the facts of what's going on in these other countries.
There's a lot of people suffering.
Yeah. So, and it would, since they are already at a poverty level that is not generally, unless you go to the homeless, part of the picture of the developed countries, it just takes a little longer for people in the developed countries to reach that starvation, because first they would have to go bankrupt, then they would have to lose everything, and then they would, okay, so that's the picture on that. So it just takes longer, whereas these people here are much closer to starvation already, so it doesn't take very long at all for them to go from, say, making $4 a day or $9 a day to starvation, because if they lose that, they're already at subsistence. And so the other part of this side of this whole picture, because as we said, there's two sides. There's the virus and what it's doing to some people, and then there's the lockdown side of it. There's actually a third side to this, and it's a minor side that's also not covered very much, but it's the states that are the harshest states, and I say states, I mean countries. The ones with the harshest tones for the lockdown are the ones that are threatening to throw people in jail. Now, some places like Panama will fine you $50,000 to $100,000 only if you have the virus and you're walking around and not observing the lockdown. But a lot of these other countries are threatening to throw people in jail, following them around with drones and scolding them like children, and threatening jail in a lot of countries. And I just wanted to say, this isn't my personal opinion. These are news flashes, headlines that grabbed our attention. So you're welcome to go follow up on this, but this says prisons breeding grounds for disease. And then one of the articles is talking about Julian Assange's life being endangered. That's one guy that's in jail, but there's many, many people in jails, especially in developed countries, for a lot of nonviolent crimes. The article goes on to say that prison inmates are the most neglected of any population, especially in the U.S. when it comes to medical attention. It's actually medical neglect, and it's actually a crime to allow people to get sick and die, and many times days and weeks go by and nobody pays any attention to them. So I'm just saying all this. I'm going to spare you all the details. I just want to mention this article goes into detail about how crazy it is to tell people that because you're walking around in a park where there's no people, you're outside, out of doors, and you're walking around without a mask, or maybe you're supposed to be home according to local rules. Because you're not observing that, we're going to throw you in jail, therefore ensuring 100% you're probably going to get sick. In other words, throwing you into a population where the odds of getting these kinds of illnesses, including COVID-19 or any other infectious illness, where you will likely not get medical attention as soon as you need it, where your personal space is definitely going to decrease, where all of the reasons for having a lockdown, the social distancing, the keeping people away from sick people, all of those reasons disappear when you're thrown into a cell with a bunch of other people, or even if it's only one other person. Many cases, many times they don't have room in the jails and they put them all in a population cell. So what you're telling people is that if you don't observe what we say, do it this way, we're going to throw you into this breeding ground for unhealth and sickness. That qualifies as cruel and unusual punishment in and of itself, and is illegal in North America, according to the Constitution.
Thanks for bringing up the other side, Frank. We all really need to hear the other side.
Here's some good news. New coronavirus cases in Italy fall to 25-day low. So confidence is quietly growing that the virus may be retreating. So things in one of the worst places are decreasing. And the other headline that grabbed my attention this week was that Wuhan, China has lifted its lockdown. 65,000 Chinese split from Wuhan ASAP as soon as the lockdown was lifted. 65,000, and I don't recall, I accidentally clicked out of the article, but I don't recall if they did that within the first couple of days, and they must have, because Wuhan just recently lifted the lockdown. So that's good news that two of the epicenters, both Wuhan, China and Italy, are seeing enough of an improvement for one thing, for China to remove the lockdown, and 65,000 people took off. It's interesting to me because the Chinese in Wuhan protested several years ago about we made a different video about this, about the pollution there and the problems, the health problems that it was creating, and the government there did nothing about it. So now, after this breakdown, all these people have left. So I'm glad to hear the good news. When you put this all together, you start realizing, the complete picture of how things are being handled and what it's actually doing to people. As the restrictions are lifted in Wuhan, people are leaving Wuhan because there's a reason not to be there, because that's where it originated and that's where people's health was going down. Things aren't going to get any better there for next year, or the next time around. I'm glad to see that these Chinese of Wuhan are leaving. All right, and let us know which one of these grabbed you, which one of these headlines, and let us know anything that we may have missed, or which headlines you prefer and which headlines you didn't like, or anything at all in the comments. And as always, thank you for watching our videos. Subscribe, click notification bell, and have a wonderful day.
Ciao. Stay at home news flash.
It doesn't look too good. It looks crooked.
You're the camera guy. What's the problem? At least you have different clothes on.
Oh my gosh.
I'm not sure why it's even turned that way.
That might be better.
So call it the stay at home news flash.